Welcome to the Moxie Live It speaker series. We are very fortunate to have with us Kurt Avarell.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, it's good. You're welcome. Kurt is best known, at least in Utah Valley, I think, is the founder of Canopy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're fortunate that he decided to spend some time with us to share a little bit of his life experience. So first off, Kurt, if you could just give me the 20-second nutshell of as maybe for the people who are listening, but you say it to me, of you. Who are you?
Yeah. So I am a husband and father of 4 kids, ages 6, 9, 10, and 14, and a lover of mountain biking, flying, and tech.
Family, mountain biking, flying, and tech.
Yep.
Hey, if I forget, please come back to the flying.
Okay.
Because that's really interesting. I didn't know that. So where were you born?
Lake Arrowhead, California.
And how long did you live in Lake Arrowhead?
So I lived there until I was 12. Then my family moved to Utah, to Provo, Utah, which was a big change, California to Provo, Utah at that age. And my family lived here in Utah for probably about 5 years, and then they all ended up moving back to California. And I
to
stayed
Lake Arrowhead?
Back, mostly back to Lake Arrowhead.
So just to back up a little, why in the first place were you in Lake Arrowhead? I mean, to me, that's being from California. That's like a vacation place.
It's a vacation place, yeah. So it was also like a magical place to grow up because it's so if you're not familiar with, I mean, you're familiar with Lake Arrowhead.
Yeah.
So it's a lake. So we grew up in the summers boating and in the winter skiing. It's a mountain community. It is mostly vacation homes. We also had a lot of stars who lived up there, movie stars and just famous people. So Patrick Swayze was a neighbor, and it was a fun place to grow up as a kid. And the reason we were there was my grandpa had founded a company. He was a home builder called Highland Mountain Homes, and my dad kind of took that over from my grandpa, and so most of my family was there. My grandpa was there. Several uncles and aunts were there, and they kind of ran the building business up there. Their largest builder. My uncle was engineer, so he engineered everything. My dad would build it. My other uncle would do all the heating and air conditioning, and so it was a fun place, but not a lot of permanent residents.
But it seems I would guess that like the people who are the permanent residents, a fairly tight community.
Very tight community, yeah.
You knew who each other were.
Everybody,
you knew who
yep.
the tourists were.
Totally.
I mean, like you knew the tourists because they weren't part of the community.
Yeah, we called them Flatlanders. So it's a very windy. If you drive up there, it's a very windy road, and one of the roads is called Rim of the World because you're literally driving on the edge of the mountain, and it's straight down on one side, and the Flatlanders drive slow on every corner, or if a squirrel comes out, they stop. So those were the tourists, and if you are moving quick, that's how you know you're from the mountains. And my family still has pretty strong ties there. My brother is there still. He's actually opening a restaurant right on the lake. I don't know if you've been to the village.
I have.
Yeah, so he's opening a modern restaurant right on the lake in the village, and in just like 2 weeks. I still have an uncle and aunt, 2 uncles and aunts who still live there. So pretty heavily tied to Lake Arrowhead. I consider it my home. That's even when I lived here in Utah, it was where we always went back to.
So the home building when you were young, what happened to the home building business? I mean, did you ever think that would be your path?
I never did. No, yeah, I never really thought it would be my path, but I did take a lot of interest in homes, and so we'd always hit the Pareto homes and things like that, and so I appreciate nicely done custom homes, or even semi-custom homes, but it was never my path. And honestly, I only learned a little bit about building. I mean, just enough to be dangerous. So my dad, when he moved to Utah, he continued to build here, and then moved back and continued to build back in California.
So are most of the homes in the Lake Arrowhead area? Did he get down to the Flatlanders? Did he get up to Mammoth?
No, almost all in Lake Arrowhead. Yeah, in fact, so one of their signature pieces at Highland Mountain Homes was they had this. Every home was built with if you drive through the mountains, you'll see that most of the homes are set way back from the road, so you can't really see them. They have long driveways, so it's hard to know what address they're at. So what they would do is they would build an arrow, because Lake Arrowhead, right? So they have like a wood arrowhead with the address of the home, and it would sit outside on the road.
Yeah.
And so if you drive around Lake Arrowhead even today, you'll just see, because they built hundreds of homes, you'll see these arrowheads, and those are homes that he built.
I've seen them. That's interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't
those
know
are
that.
all.
So if it has the
Highland Mountain
arrowhead like that, that's
homes. That's a Highland Mountain
that's
home.
an Avarell home.
That's an Avarell home. So it's fun to drive with him because he's like, I built that house. And
So you came to Utah and
Yep.
started building homes. Was the home building not so good here? I know we're not focusing on Dad and the home building business.
Yeah,
so I'll try to go
so-
fast. It's just interesting.
Let's see. We moved back. It was good. And in fact, the company that he was working with here continued to do well, and it continues to build today. And then he went back to California to basically, get back to California.
Lake
I
Arrowhead.
think it was Lake Arrowhead really was the
Yeah.
draw. Yeah. With my family, there's an unusual draw to Lake Arrowhead.
Yeah. That's a good
So-
thing. It's understandable for
Yeah, it's a fun
for all
place.
of us that have been there.
Yeah, it's a fun place.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So high school. Where were you for high school?
So I was in high school at Granite High in South Salt Lake.
So at some point you moved back here. Or did you not go back with your dad?
Yeah, so when we moved to Provo, and then we ended up in Salt Lake before he moved back to California.
Okay.
And we lived up next to the Big Cottonwood Canyon,
Mm-hmm.
which was the boundaries for Brighton High School.
Okay.
But I think kind of given my California upbringing, I like the diversity of kind of the inner. I mean, Lake
Yeah.
Arrowhead is not inner city, but it's pretty multicultural and different.
That's great.
Different demographics. So I ended
Yeah.
up going to Granite High, which is in South Salt Lake. And if you've ever been to South Salt Lake, you
Yeah.
know it's kind of a rougher part of town. But I love that. I love the fact that it was more diverse.
Yeah.
Different demographics. You had people who, came from a lower middle class and a few upper class, but it was largely kind of a lower class, middle class high school. And that was the group I meshed with best.
So young Kurt in high school, what kind of what were you like as a freshman in high school? Interests? What were you doing?
Yeah, so I got my driver's license as a freshman when I was still in junior high. So junior high, ninth grade at here was junior high. So I was the only person who drove to junior high, which
How? I mean, what's the age here?
16.
So you were.
But I
just a
turned
young-
16 at the very end of in March of my ninth grade year.
Nice.
So the school had to figure out how to accommodate somebody who was driving to junior high, which is not common. It was fun. I took school pretty seriously, 9th and 10th grade, and then not so much in 11th and 12th grade.
So what changed?
So this is an interesting story. It actually ties into Moxie. So I started a pest control company, but
I did not know that.
I was not smart enough to figure out what you guys have built here. So, and it actually predated a lot. This was 97, right? And you had some early entrant, big companies in the market, but not a lot, like you see today.
I
So I was
started. I started in '97.
You started in 97?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wish I would have started with you.
Yeah.
So I was very unsophisticated. I went door to door. I sold pest control subscriptions. I did a lot of termite treatments for FHA and VA loans. So I had some contracts with some home builders that they'd had to get those treatments done as kind of their pre-construction checklist. And it was awesome. So what changed for me was I started to make money, and I was like, well, what do you need high school for? Because the income was coming in, and I had probably a little bit too much fun in high school, and so yeah, that's
So
what changed.
you finished your sophomore year and then just started working full time with your pest control company.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
That was your junior year.
yeah.
So at some point you become a tax attorney.
Yeah.
So you had to have made it back to school. So how did you end up finishing high school?
Yeah, so I didn't finish high school. That's the interesting concepts, or kind of an interesting turning point. So I grew up with a family who was very entrepreneurial. My mom was an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur. My grandparents were entrepreneurs. And I just thought, you know what, I want to be an entrepreneur, and I think I can do it without an education. So, and that does happen sometimes. I changed my mind, by the way, later.
We'll
little
get
bit later.
to that.
So,
I love this actual.
but
I haven't run into this before, so I'm really interested in it.
yeah, so in the high school side, I just said, you know what, I'm gonna drop out, and I did. It was a very interesting time though, because I was also, the only thing I really loved about high school, apart from the social side, which I really enjoyed, is I loved DECA and FBLA. So I was big time into that, which is like the national marketing and future business leaders in America. So I love that. And it was so interesting because I did really, really well in those programs. And then my grades were like terrible. I mean, like I think my GPA one semester was like 0.7 7 or something like that. I got 1 like C- or something and all Fs. And because I just didn't show up to class. It wasn't like I was doing the work and not doing well in it. I just didn't show up. And so it became this tug of war because the vice principal wanted me out because I was truly a bad influence because I also had like the most absences of anybody, or I think it was second most absences of anybody in high school. And so he wanted me out, right? Because this guy's like he's not up to any good. He's not being a good influence on other kids, which is true. I was not. And by the way, with my kids, it's a totally different story. And but at the same time, the DECA and FBLA leaders who were teachers in the high school wanted me in because I was also going to the national competitions and taking like first, second, and third at state and national competitions. So I was doing them back to back over the summer. So it was a really interesting tug of war. And then, I guess where that changed was I served an LDS mission, and I had a mission companion who's still a really good friend of mine. And he was on the path to go to medical school, and a really sharp guy ended up going to some very good, tier 1 medical schools. And we were working on a problem. We were both in the office at the time, and we were working on a problem of how to put companionships in different places. And it was a hard problem to solve. And I told him, I kind of looked at it, tried to figure it out, the math, and I said, it's not doable. We can't do it. Like, I have to find another solution. He said, well, let me look at it. He spent like 20 minutes on it. And he comes out and he goes, oh, here's a solution. I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, like, how did he figure it out? And I couldn't figure it out. And I like connected the dots. I'm like, I knew he was a sharp guy, and I knew he knew math better than I did. And I was like, the clear connection here is like he excelled in high school and then went to a year of college before the mission, and I did not. And it wasn't because I wasn't smart. It was just because I had never learned like that math because I didn't go to class, which, makes sense. So at that point on my mission, I was like, I gotta go to school because like, I know I'm capable of doing these things. I just got to figure it out. So, long story short, first semester of college, I get back and I'm nervous because I had only failed at school up until this point.
By the way, I love the conflict. We know you became a tax attorney.
Yeah.
So when you lead out with, I had a 0-point-something GPA and fell out of high school.
Yeah.
After my sophomore year, I just love that because I think I'm just so excited to find out how you became a tax attorney.
Yeah.
I think we're getting there.
Yeah. So we're getting there. So I'll just tell this one story, and I don't want to spend I don't mean to spend too much time on it, but I got to college, and in the first semester I got like a 3.5. Right. I was nervous. Like I thought for sure I had only failed.
How did you get to college? You didn't.
I
only
begged.
did your sophomore year.
I begged my way in.
You didn't get a GED?
I did get a GED.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went down to California and took the California proficiency exam.
Okay.
And that allowed me to have it's a high school equivalent.
It's unbelievable you went to 2 years of high school and got a 3.5 your first semester in college. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I surprised myself. That's for sure. I mean, I really went to that first semester of college thinking I was going to fail because that's the only thing I could remember in my head about school was that I didn't do well in school. And I don't think at that point I really knew that it was because I just didn't go. And if you don't go to class, you can't pass your class. So anyway, I got a 3.5 and that my confidence level went up. So next semester I went and hit it harder, got a 4.0, next semester 4.0, next semester 4.0. So I don't say that because I think highly of myself. I say that because I think it's a learning moment. And it took me a while to come to grips with talking about this part of my life, right? But it's a learning moment for kids who, struggle in school or something that like you can turn it around, right? Like I'm an example of like going from, being the most absent, most, probably one of the worst GPAs in high school and dropping out to, figuring out how to, dedicate myself and get some self-discipline and like, so that's, and so anyway, then after that college, wow. I actually really enjoyed college. I figured out that I could do it well. And that's the story.
That's really inspiring. In your own head, it must have been extremely intimidating and fearful that first semester back in college.
So intimidating.
So you got the 3.5.
Yeah.
First of all, did you have second thoughts after you signed up, like right at the beginning of college, like maybe I shouldn't do this? What am I doing? Or were you pretty committed?
When I get into something, I go in pretty hard. So I was very committed, but I definitely didn't know what the outcome was going to be.
So
and I feared the outcome.
Then you got you got your next semester of a 4.0.
Yeah.
So in your head, entrepreneurial Kurt, all I heard you say is I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I already was an entrepreneur, had at least 3 generations of entrepreneurs in the family. And then this missionary companion, I realized some light went off that just said, you know what? There's some level of formal education that I think would help me on my journey. I realized that there's a deficit.
Yeah.
Is that
absolutely
okay to say?
100%.
Most, I think, people, when they come to at least that much of a recognition, wouldn't have the capacity to go back and get 4.0, 4.0, 4.0. There's a difference between saying, I need an education, I need to go get 4.0, 4.0, 4.0. And where I'm going with that is 2 questions, and you can answer either or both. Where did the drive come from to go get 4.0s?
Yeah.
And then the second one is right as you were in that first 3.5 and 4.0, if someone said, what are you going to do for a living, what would your answer have been at that point?
Yeah. So on the first one, the drive was my failure. Honestly, I viewed high school as a failure, and it was embarrassing. Like, it would come up in conversations, and I just, it'd be like, where'd you graduate from? I'm like, and I didn't want to lie. I'm like, well, I went to Granite High, right? So that's kind of like.
Where'd you go to middle school?
Granite Park Junior High, and then
that's the answer. Granite Park Junior High.
Park Junior High. I graduated. That's right. I did graduate.
Yeah.
So that failure drove me, and it actually, I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it, and I could do it well. And I took it a little overboard by going and doing the master's and then also the JD. And then the second question, of what I was going to do, I don't think I really knew. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But there was a part of me that's like, you should go to law school. Like, go to law school. Like, it would be cool to be an attorney, right?
Where did that come from?
I don't know. I actually have no idea. I don't have any attorneys in the family. I think it probably still stemmed from that same sense of like, you got to prove to yourself that you can do you can go and operate at a level that wasn't possible, or that you failed at in high school, right? It was still kind of going back to that failure in high school, and you can operate as an attorney, which in my view at that time was like, if you're an attorney, you've done something, you were super sharp, you've done that opinion's changed on some attorneys. So I'm just kidding.
No, but there's certain hurdles you have to.
There are certain hurdles
you have to.
Yep.
So
I worked my way through it.
What's the first college you went to?
So I started at SUU.
Okay, SUU.
My mom, when I was on my mission, went and begged them to let me in. They said, okay, look, if he comes in and takes the ACT, because I hadn't even taken the ACT in high school. I didn't take anything because I didn't go. We'll let him in on a conditional basis. So I said, okay, I'll go and show up the ACT. So I went and took the ACT. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even bring a calculator. I learned when I got there that I could have brought a calculator. And so I took the test without the calculator. I mean, I didn't do great on it. I did okay.
Yeah.
But they were kind enough to let me stay. And then I applied to BYU with Ashley, my wife, on my which at that time we were still dating, after our sophomore year, and then we went to BYU, transferred into the accounting program at BYU.
Okay. So
I wouldn't have gotten into BYU. There was no question about that from the outset.
Right.
I had to prove,
I'm going to come back to Ashley in a minute. Yeah. I'm going to try to get to,
by the way,
your first job.
Oh, I got to tell you one other thing on this.
Yeah.
So if you average my GPA with Ashley's GPA in high school, I would have graduated with a 2.0 because she had like a 3.99. So there's
that surprised me.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you then at some point transferred to BYU. Was that after 1 year, 2 years?
2 years at SU.
So you'd had a few 4.0s and a 3.5?
Yep. Yeah.
And you get to BYU. Why did you go to do accounting?
I did. I went straight into the accounting program.
And why?
I wanted to go to the business school.
Okay.
And the accounting program was the most, I think it still is one of the more prestigious programs in the business school.
Yeah.
And it goes back to, I can't say exactly why accounting, other than like when I saw something that was harder, that's the path I want to take. I'm like, let's go into the hardest.
What about Ashley? Because I know we're gonna come back to this, but did she already know she wanted to do accounting?
Oh, she was information technology.
Okay.
So she was like computer science.
So and I'm old. I'm a little bit older, I think. But when I got a degree in accounting from BYU, I don't know if I told you that.
Yeah, I knew that. Yeah.
But back then, the masters of accountants, there was 3 levels, and one of them was audit, one of them was tax.
Information systems.
Yes, that's not what
different.
Ashley did.
Yeah, different.
Okay.
So information systems combined accounting with tech.
Okay.
Information technology was actually in the technology building, which was more on the CS side, computer science.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you did not go. You weren't
in the same.
both hanging out in the Tanner building.
No.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get to BYU. You go through the accounting, and did you decide to get a master's?
Yep. I decided to get a master's in accounting, and then I did the joint JD Mac. So the way that worked is I was admitted to law school. I hadn't completed my bachelor's, and I hadn't completed my master's. And I got all 3 degrees on the same day.
I didn't even know there was such a thing.
Yeah. I don't know that that's very common. But if I had dropped out in year 6, I think I graduated in about 6 years from all 3 programs, or roughly something like that. And if I had dropped out the day before graduation or something the week before, I would have had no degrees after 6 years, and I would have been a high school dropout.
It's still Granite whatever.
Yeah, Granite Park Junior High.
So if people would ask after 6 years of college, you say, "What's your
Granite Park Junior High?"
Granite Park Junior High. That's funny.
Yeah.
I've never heard that there was even such an option as getting a JD Mac bachelor's.
Yeah.
In the same.
As far as I know, I don't know anybody else who did that.
How did you even find out about it? Or did you go in and say, "Hey, I've got an idea," and go sell it?
There was a JD Mac program, but most of the people who did the JD Mac already completed the bachelor's.
Yeah, everyone I know.
Yeah, I mean, people who go to law school
wife
have a bachelor's
has her
degree.
Mac.
Oh, yes.
From BYU. So yeah
that's the way they do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was like an oversight. I don't think it was special treatment or maybe, but I do know that every time especially when I apply to a law firm or something, they're like, "Wait, you don't have a bachelor's degree?" They like fact check my resume, like that the dates were right,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the way it worked out. Yeah.
So interesting. Okay, so when you're in law school, you sort of had kind of made your decision, I guess, that you're going to do tax accounting.
Yeah.
Right. So so even in that first year of law school, or did you go through regular law school, first, second, third, like regular?
All 3 years.
So my experience is when I go speak to some of the law school classes each semester.
Yeah.
And a lot of them in their first year, they don't even know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah, I knew I wanted to do.
That helped you know your course load a little bit?
It definitely did. Yeah, I wanted to do tax, and not because I necessarily love tax. Although I did like the problem solving behind tax. It's a very as you know, it's a very logical flow, and you can kind of get to an answer. At least that's what I thought at the time, and so I liked the problem solving part of it, and so I took a lot of tax classes both in law school and the accounting program. And that was probably one of the key things that ended up getting me into Milbank. The fact that I had that. Not very many attorneys have accounting experience, and in finance and transactional law and in Wall Street, it's all about accounting and money and where the money flows and waterfalls and stuff. So super helpful.
Okay, so we'll back up. So where into this equation? Where's your wife from, Ashley?
She's from Brigham City.
Brigham City.
Yep.
So she goes to Brigham City, and she got a 3.99.
3.99. Yep.
And then what made her say, "I'm going to take that 3.99 and I'm going to go to SUU"?
I thought you were going to say, "I'm going to take that 3.99 and marry that guy."
Oh, we're getting to that.
So she could have gone anywhere, and she could have gone to BYU.
And better.
So she, that's a good question. Maybe it was so that we could meet and get married.
Yeah.
She had to come down a few rungs, and I mean, SU is a great school, but she had to come down and figure out how to.
I know the people I know who went to SUU. They love. There's a little bit of a sense of community.
Totally.
There's a little bit about the different culture that the campus brings.
Yeah.
Some it's because they have family down there or family in the faculty. So I was just curious if there was any of that going on.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, that is. I'm glad you reminded me. Thank you.
I didn't remind you because I don't know.
Yeah, you did remind me. So some of her family is from Cedar City. Right. She didn't have immediate family. She had she had ties there. Her dad had ties to Cedar City. Some of her grandparents' extended family was from Cedar City. So that was a place that she had visited quite a bit. And so that was a draw, and which helped her make that decision.
Okay. So she's
I was relieved when she left and came with me to BYU.
So I want to know about the first time you met. Do you remember?
Yeah. So
you better. You better.
So, all right. So we were in the same ward.
Okay.
And I met her in the ward. And the first times that I remember meeting her, we actually were in the same, I think it was called the family home evening groups, you know?
Yeah.
This is the classic story, right?
Yeah.
So she's very athletic. And so I learned early, don't play basketball against her, don't play volleyball against her. You play with her because you'll win, but don't play against her. At least that was my experience. And so she was naturally very talented. And so that's where I met her. And the first time I asked her to, hang out, I asked her if she wanted to come over for dinner. I actually remember exactly where we were standing. We were standing we went to like a seminary building. That was our ward building. And we were outside in kind of the common area. And I asked her if she wanted to come over to have dinner. And she said, well, what are you making? So there's some qualifying questions here. And I said, pasta fettuccine Alfredo. And her question was, like, from a box? And we actually still joke about this. And I had no idea how to make fettuccine Alfredo any other way than from a box. I mean, I still don't actually. So I said yes. And the look on her face, I was actually going to make her fettuccine Alfredo from a box, was like, I don't know about this guy. But we ended up hanging out, and I don't remember if we actually had the fettuccine Alfredo or not. But I do know that since we have been married, we never had it from a box. It's always been handmade. That was it.
That brings up a whole list of questions. But so first off, did Ashley play some of those sports in high school?
Yeah, she played volleyball and basketball.
And did she play them at SUU?
No, she did not. Yeah,
All
she
right.
probably could have, but she didn't pursue it.
Yeah. Okay. So you're in the ward. So being in the ward, it's actually fair to not remember meeting. I mean, you said you did. I'm just saying. Most people I know that met the person they married in their ward, they don't necessarily remember the first time they met.
Yeah.
Because it might have been like a ward mixer or at some meeting. So do you remember the time, and this may not have been when you met, it might have been during the first date, second date, where you just said, I find this person interesting.
Yeah, no, I do remember. So the first time.
Sometimes just because they're just pretty.
Yeah.
Sometimes because they're athletic or smart. I'm just curious.
Yeah, it was a combination of those things. So the first time was right outside where she lived. She lived right next to the gym building at SU, which was a new really nice building, and they had a field, and we were playing. I can't remember. I think it was Ultimate Frisbee in this family home evening group, and that's the first time I remember being like really interested. And then I stopped by her apartment quite frequently after that.
So this sounds like from what you just said, maybe at the beginning you were more interested than she was.
No, 100%, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the $1 million question. Yeah. How did you say, would you be more interested in a relationship with a
Granite Junior Park, Granite Park Junior High graduate?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was an interesting conversation. I don't remember when that conversation came up. The track record there, but luckily by that time I was on a totally different trajectory, because we met in our beginning of our sophomore year.
You could show 4.0s.
Yeah, so I showed some. Yeah, exactly. I was like, by the way, it was like a little footnote on the high school issue, but what was the question again?
Just like when is the time I'm asking, like when you realize I'm really interested in this person?
Yeah.
And then I said, like, what happened, the reverse? You kind of answered that. So, like, where did it come into where she became interested in you?
Yeah, so we had some mutual friends. Some of my roommates were friends with her roommates. And so we'd started to show up at their apartment more frequently. And I think there was some guessing games about why we were showing up more frequently. And then...
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And then I think it became apparent, but I do remember it took a little bit of effort on my end to kind of get things moving and, kind of sell her on the concept. Now I was a return missionary, right? And she was young. She was a sophomore, but she was still 19 at the time. She was 20 when we got married, but and she came from a family where her mom was like, get a degree, you got to get a degree. Her mom had gotten a degree, and that was really important to her, Ashley, and also to her mom. And I think there was a little bit of a conception, like a little bit of a belief that if you get married, that could, push you in a different direction and away from education, which it ultimately didn't. So there was that obstacle, right? So it's like, I'm off my mission. I've been off my mission for over a year, and I dated a lot of people, and I was like a typical return missionary, looking, to get married. And we had that conversation. That was an interesting conversation, because I was like, well, if we're going to date, like, we're dating because we want to figure out if we want to, get married. And she's like, wait, whoa, like, what do you mean? So that was, so that's how it went. But it ultimately, worked out.
That's the proper response for a 19-year-old.
That is the proper response.
So like, well done, Ashley.
Well done, Ashley. Mm-hmm. And when our daughter is 19,
yeah,
I have a different view on it now.
So the first time you're asking her out, and she's saying, "What are you making?" And that look in her eyes, "What are you making?" You're saying fettuccine Alfredo, and she's like looking at you like,
right.
not too impressed.
Not too impressed.
At some point, she has to start looking at you, saying, "Okay, it's, I'm interested."
Yeah.
And there's another point where they look at you and like thinking, "Hey, maybe I could be with this person."
That was months later.
Yeah, so that's good to know. Later, so like, what are some of the things that happen in your courtship that you think helped move that along?
Yeah, I think we spent a lot of time together. We had a lot of fun. I mean, it was one thing that is great about SUU is you have a lot of outdoor activities down there, with national parks, and you're just out you're in Cedar City, so you just got a lot of stuff to do outside because there's not a lot to do in Cedar City. So we did a lot. We did, there's bonfires and.
That's the best stuff to do. That's so much better than the stuff that's inside.
Yeah, so fun. So we had a ton of fun. We dated for several months before the conversations got pretty serious, and then ended up dating about probably 7 months before we got engaged.
I'm guessing because of the age, you being a return missionary, her being a sophomore, you probably, from even what you just said, were thinking marriage first.
Oh, 100%.
And then once you had that conversation, you said, then this cat's kind of out of the bag. So then, like, the next conversations follow. Was there ever a point where her hand was on your forehead, just saying, "Hey, hold on"?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Whoa,
right
whoa,
after
whoa.
that conversation.
Yeah, like whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we had so there was the conversation of, well, I'm not quite ready.
Yeah.
And so then, probably me and my naivety, it was like, I was kind of like, well, if you're not ready, then maybe you're not interested in me, but it's not the same thing, right?
She's 19.
She's 19.
Yeah.
So, I was just not old enough, mature enough to understand that concept that, somebody could want to like actually date for a while.
Well, you were only 21, 22, right?
I was still young too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, it's not like either one of you were.
Yeah, exactly.
We're
exactly
wise with your years.
Exactly. So that moment definitely came, and it didn't last long though. I think I learned, I was still persistent.
You just said, I'm all in.
I'm all in, yeah. So I was persistent. Like if you asked her,
you went after Ashley.
She would definitely tell you that I was persistent. But I think I toned it down a little bit so that we could like actually get to know each other.
Hopefully now you're toning it back up again. So.
Right, exactly. And then we had enough space. I think a big part of it was meeting, each other's families. And
how'd that go?
It went well. I think, it went well. Like, with my family, it went really well. With her family, mom.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Well, because my family,
when
loved her.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yeah,
okay.
My family loved her, so it went really well. And I don't think that her family didn't love me, but they didn't love the idea that she was 19 and like potentially getting married, which is totally understandable.
I like her family already.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I was nervous. I was nervous to meet her parents and especially her mom, because I knew that was a subject, it was a sensitive subject. So, but it went well. I had a lot of questions of, what are you going to do? And I at that time I actually was saying I was going to go to law school, and, but as a parent looking at a sophomore, in college who, was still 21, you hear, I guess it was 22. Like you hear like you're going to go to law school, but that's a long ways off. There's still a lot to do. So understandably there was some, nothing that ever was verbalized to me, but I'm sure a little bit of skepticism. And, but ultimately it worked, and I got the stamp of approval from Mom, and luckily Mom has since said, since that time that she's really, really glad, right? That she didn't listen to Mom.
It was like last month.
Yeah. Like last month. It took, 18 years, but
yeah.
So anyway, that's the,
so you dated how long before you got married?
So we dated, about 9 months.
9 months. And then who was it? Did both of you want to come to BYU or?
Yeah, we transferred at the same time.
And
we
were
both
going
one
of you dragging the
Yep.
other one?
No, I think we were both going at the same time.
So that must have made Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
What's her maiden name?
Gilbert.
Must have made the Gilberts happy.
Yeah.
Bringing, back here.
Yep.
Okay. So you're in school, and who graduated first? Or did you that also?
She graduated first.
Okay. And then did she get a job or?
She supported us. So that was the other thing, right? So when we got married, she had all the money because she was responsible, and I had mostly been irresponsible up until my mission. Right? So she bought our first car with money. So Ashley's like a very hard worker. She just gets stuff done, right? So she worked 2 different jobs. I grew up in a very different family culture where things were a little more relaxed. Responsibility wasn't as high. She grew up have a lot of responsibility, and so she worked hard, had 2 jobs, saved up money, so she worked, supported me. I mean, I worked as well, but she worked and supported me through college, and then thankfully I've paid back, some of that, most of it, and that's how it worked. Yeah,
that's funny. When I was an English major, and when I married my wife, she was just graduating, and I was just applying to the junior corps.
Okay.
And so when I hadn't even changed my major to accounting yet, when I asked her father if I could marry her in the interview, I remember we were in Salt Lake, and he said, what are you studying? And I'm like, English, I think. He said, what are you going to do for a living? And I said, I have no idea. And that's not what a father wants to hear, right?
Like,
so I don't think they do. I don't know how a father goes, yes, we got the right one.
Yeah, exactly.
So that he says, how are you going to support my daughter? I was like, she graduates next semester with her master's in tax accounting.
What do I need to do?
You knew that, right? So
that's
she's the
funny.
top at BYU. She's like #1 person there.
Yeah, that's impressive.
So we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a similar.
Yeah, totally similar situation.
Okay, so you get to graduation day. She graduated. She already was graduated. Was working. Where? What kind of job?
So she did a couple different things. She worked in like IT, computer science, engineering.
It's fairly relevant because it's going to come into play.
Oh,
right?
it totally comes into play.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, yeah. So she had all the computer experience. I had literally no computer experience,
none.
right?
But her with that technology job, did it learn how to code and stuff?
She knew. Yep, she knew how to code.
Yeah. Okay. So she knew how to code. Had software, computer. So you graduate. You then start. You just get to law school.
Yeah.
And then now you're going to graduate. By the time you get to law school, it's tax. It comes time to get a job. How did you make the decision to go to? Is it Millbank, right?
Yeah,
in
Millbank.
New York. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I got really fortunate, honestly. Going from BYU to a New York law firm is pretty difficult, and there's definitely an element of luck to that. And so I was definitely in the lucky camp. I went out and interviewed in New York. It was right before our first child was born. I think Ashley was due in 2 or 3 weeks, so she could have had the baby at any time. And the interviews that were happening in New York and in Washington, D.C., you had to be there in person. And so I went out, flew out, spent a week in 3 or 4 days in New York, and then 3 or 4 days down in D.C., and just hit all the firms. BYU had lined them up. There was a small group of students who were interested in that, in those areas, in those geographies, and we just interviewed. And I got a call back. I don't remember exactly how it all happened, but when I got the call back from Millbank to fly out for another interview, that was a big deal. I mean, going to Millbank was a really big deal, and for me. and that turned into an offer. And then the next summer I was out there for an internship, and it was amazing. Like, the internships are amazing out there.
It's because it's like dating.
Yes.
You can't. No one wants to reveal like all their.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So they wine and dine you all summer long.
Ashley was there.
There.
Both you said this is the life.
This is the life. We're in Manhattan. Black cars on the firm are driving us everywhere. There's parties on a regular basis. I mean, even things like, when Ashley would...
They don't even break out the whips at that point, do they?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hardly did any work. And they're taking you to sporting events. They flew us over to Munich, Germany, to work out of the Munich office, right?
Smart.
Like, we
That's
added
a
lot of value.
I did not know they did that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, so spent 2 weeks in Munich. Yeah, it was actually, it was a ton of fun.
Okay,
and then you get there full time.
So after the internship, you're both thinking Millbank. This is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
So go back, you finish up, you move out to New York, and it sounds like you were both on board. Wasn't like you were split.
Yeah. No, we were both on board. Yeah.
And if someone were to ask you as you went to work for Millbank, where are you going to be in 10 years? What would you have said?
Startup entrepreneur.
Oh, so you already knew that.
Yeah. Yep.
That's interesting.
Yep. The only reason I probably wouldn't have taken any other position from like a local Utah firm. I did work with a firm here in Utah over the first summer of law school, which was a great experience. But I probably wouldn't have taken any offer locally. The only reason I took the Millbank offer was because it was New York and because it was Millbank.
So there's still one question I'm going to go back to a little bit that I'm puzzled with. You said I got really lucky. So like, I know enough to know about law firms to know they're not charity cases.
Yeah, they're not charity cases.
And they're not rolling dice or playing darts.
Yeah.
So how did you get lucky?
I don't really know, honestly. I think
because it seems to me they needed a tax person that maybe had your expertise, and you interviewed well and thought maybe you'd sit well in front of their customers. I don't know. I mean, you tell me.
It could be. I mean, I'm
pretty sure they're acting in their own best interest. So
why? The 100%. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I say I'm lucky because there were only, I think there were fewer than half a dozen BYU students who ended up in New York at a big firm. It was not very many students who ended up there.
Yeah. So how did you do it? Did you get good grades at the law school?
So I did okay my first semester, like average, because I was starting a company. And then I decided when I got average, I thought I can't do that. I got to like up my game. So my second semester I did really well. And so I think they were keying off my second semester grades of law school, and I think they were keying off of my tax and accounting background. And then beyond that, I guess I just interviewed well because I still consider it luck. I mean, it was very unusual for them to give me an offer. The other part is like I'm competing against Harvard. I mean, I went there with Harvard and Yale, and I mean, there weren't very many schools like, in fact, I was the only BYU student there. And there weren't very many like schools in the BYU tier at that firm. And there was only 2 other BYU students in the entire firm. There were 500 attorneys, so there were only 3 of us total.
That wow. But some of those firms, like when you get to that level, they'll have rules that like, look, just to interview here,
100%. You have to have a certain GPA.
You need to be in the top 25% of the class. The top, if you're this tier of law schools, top 10%.
Yep.
This tier, top 25%.
Hard and fast.
Yeah. So you must have been on.
So in my second semester, I don't remember exactly where I ended up, but I was definitely in the top 20 or 15% of that semester. Now, once you get the Millbank offer, which I secured pretty early in my law, it was like before I started my third semester of law school. Once you get the offer, and this was actually what the recruiter would tell us, she would say, we don't really care we're never going to ask you again about your grades. You got the offer, you're in. So the rest of law school, I took a lot more relaxed. And so I ended up just doing like average in like a little bit above average in law school, but not like, I just didn't take it as serious. I worked on some startups during that time.
Let's hear about them.
So that time I worked on a startup. It was called True Counsel. The concept was similar to LegalZoom. Except that, so LegalZoom, the idea is that you have like legal documents that are drafted by computers, right? And so you can get like a will or a trust for $50, and and instead of paying an attorney $1,000. And LegalZoom has done phenomenally well with it. And our positioning was going to be a hybrid. So you're going to be able to get a will or a trust that was going to be generated by a computer but reviewed by an attorney. So instead of a $50 will that's not reviewed by an attorney from LegalZoom, or a $1,000 will that was reviewed and custom drafted by an attorney, it would be somewhere in the middle, $300 to $400 for that will. But you'd get the savings of software automation with the advantage of having an attorney look over it and make sure it's accurate. So that concept did pretty well. We only, we did business plan competitions. We started to build the software. Our team didn't have software experience, so it never really came to fruition, but it did really well in the BYU business plan competition. We went to a national business plan competition, which, going back to my DECA and FBLA days in high school, paid huge dividends during that time because it was the same kind of competitions. I did really well in business plan competitions.
That skill set probably served you well in your Millbank interviews, I'm guessing.
Yeah, probably. So I was a little bit above average after that. I never got my grades back up to that same level of that second semester when I hit it really hard, and I didn't really need to. Honestly, I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I loved law school for the people I met. I didn't love the subject matter. Honestly, I was never a huge fan of law.
So you end up in New York. Whatever happened with that first startup?
It fizzled out. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, but you got the experience.
Got the good experience. Yeah.
So you get to Millbank. Tell me about it.
So Millbank was great. So on a lot of levels. So I went into the tax group.
They never flew you to Munich again, though, did they?
No, they never did.
Right,
yeah, it's funny, and they didn't throw the parties. Well, we did throw the parties, but it was the part we were then hosting the new summer associates, right? So,
all my buddies, like you've met some of I used to in Dallas go to all their Christmas parties.
Yeah,
they have Willie Nelson come through a private gig, and one of them it was I'm trying to remember the name of the firm. You'd know it, but they did a Christmas carol every year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was kind of cool.
Yeah, no, when they throw parties, they know how to throw parties. Gibson Dunn.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, great firm. Yeah. So Millbank was great. I was in a small specialized group as a tax group. Basically, the tax group at Millbank is they're the best. They're the best of the best in the tax space in the country. And there are a few specialized groups like them at the top firms. So basically, if there was a question that there wasn't a clear answer to in the code and the regs, this is the group who would take it. So it was a small group. I think we were maybe 16 people. And I worked with these partners who were some of the smartest people I've ever met. I think all of them Harvard, all top of their class. I definitely felt a little out of place. But I think one thing that I do well is I work hard. When I do something, I work hard at it. And
all in.
That can pay.
All in.
That can pay. That can make up for any other deficiencies. And I did well with the group. I did well with the partners. I worked well with the partners because of, I think, my tax background in my graduate degree and law helped me a lot. So I came in at a level that was probably a little bit more training than most of the associates who joined in that group. And the other advantage of that group is I got to work directly with the partner. So most of the time when you come in at a big firm, you come in and you work you're doing due diligence. You're taking boxes of stuff, throwing them out on a conference table, staying all night and just marking exhibits and, categorizing things. And you are 2 or 3, 1 or 2 steps away from the partner. So you're not working on substantive legal issues, but this group was not that. I got thrown straight into substantive tax and legal issues, which basically when you're working on a tax thing, you follow the money. So we'd get some really complex derivative contract or really complex restructuring transaction, and my job was to figure out how the money flew through those documents. And these documents are hundreds of pages long, and they're flowing from the Caymans to it's crazy stuff. And so I loved it.
It sounds like it was all complex because your whole group was where it didn't fit into the code. So it sounds like it went to the other partners who said,
yep,
we have our systems that we've never seen this before.
Yep.
And then they said the stuff we've never seen.
That's where
we give it to these 16 guys.
Yep, exactly. So it was a really phenomenal.
It's almost like
experience.
forensic accounting over there.
Yeah, totally.
Forensic tax.
Yep. And so when we represented, we were the firm was lead creditor committee counsel for Lehman Brothers. So our job was to unwind their book of derivatives. So Lehman had gotten all these transactions.
Talking about The collapse?
Yeah, after the collapse. Yeah, this is in their bankruptcy.
The whole mortgage, like 2006, 7, 8? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, so it was 8, 9, 10.
8, 9, 10. Okay.
Yeah. So
you were unwinding the book of derivatives.
That was our job. And so these were all transactions that there was no clear answer to how to treat them for tax purposes.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
First, like, where are we in like the law here? Is like, in history, are we? Who were your clients, if you could say it? Like, are you the people who were suing Lehman Brothers? Is this the Prada trying to figure out like what the liability is, or is this just? I mean, like.
So for the Lehman transaction,
you were doing this for who?
For the Lehman transaction, we were representing the creditor committee council, or we were the creditor committee, which is all of their creditors.
Yeah, that's what.
That was who we represented.
The Prana.
But we were very tightly coupled with other. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily. I wouldn't say it was necessarily adversarial. It was more just transactional. We were all working together on how do you unwind all this stuff? How do you treat it for tax purposes?
That's because usually people probably have a group of assets that they know what they are. You guys were getting together and go, we don't know
what these are. Yeah.
We have no idea.
How do we do it? Yeah, that's exactly right. So it was fascinating. I mean, it was really hard work. And I literally never saw the same transaction twice, or very few times, which means that after 2 years, I left with a really good broad understanding of a lot of different ways that transactions are structured. Everything from like a derivative to a bankruptcy to, mortgage-backed securities. We did a lot of those like tranches and how that all worked. But I never really saw a lot of it. So I never really became an expert in anything. It just gave me a broad overview of everything.
Yeah.
Which in retrospect was really good. Because I wasn't going to specialize. I didn't end up specializing anyway. But super, super interesting. Yeah, really interesting.
So how long were you with Milbank?
It's a little over 2 years.
And if I asked you earlier when you first joined Milbank, that if someone had said in 10 years where you'd be, you say starting firm, when would you have guessed? I mean, how long were you intending to stay with Milbank?
So
day one.
We intended to stay 1 year. Yeah, we intended to stay 1 year.
So you doubled it.
We doubled it.
That's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah, and we loved it. Like, we love New York City. A lot of our really close friends now are friends that we made in New York City. The wards out there are phenomenal. It's just, you walk, there are some places in the country where when you walk into the ward, it's just like, just talented people. They're there, you've got.
Where were you?
We were in Manhattan. So we were in the lower Manhattan, right down by Wall Street. Mm-hmm. So you had artists, you had bankers and like investment bankers but you just had people with so many like amazing talents, photography talents and creative design talents and ad agencies and like, people who were living and working in Manhattan typically were doing some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
So we loved it. Ashley loved it. She went from Brigham City, small town Brigham City, to having a baby in a stroller in New York City. And she toughened up real quick, because if you want to survive in the streets of Manhattan, you got to be pretty tough. And what we learned pretty quickly is if you want respect from New Yorkers, you have to respond like a New Yorker. Like you want to be nice, but it's not BYU nice out there. So if you respond in a tough way, then their barriers come down and they respect. So Ashley, she picked up on that pretty quick, and I was actually kind of nervous following her through like the subways and stuff, because she was so aggressive in pushing that stroller around and like, right on people's heels, moving people, getting people out of the way. And like, but it totally worked, like New Yorker style.
I don't think that'd have been hard for her. I mean, just if she would have learned that in sports, right?
She learned in sports.
So
yeah.
You're gonna learn in basketball and in volleyball, like what you have to do to get things
exactly.
done.
And she did it. So it was fun.
That was my guess.
Same kind of thing. So super fun time. New York was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
So tell me how you left New York.
Yeah. So
how and why?
Yeah. So the firm was fun. I would do it again. Absolutely. If somebody who asked me if they had an opportunity to go to New York and work at a firm like that, or honestly anywhere in New York, just because it's New York, I would say do it. Like, especially if you're young, just go out and do it, because it's once in a lifetime opportunity, and it's such a different environment.
So since you said that, I'm going to pause still. How many hours a week were you working?
So my worst weeks were over 100 a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. And back to back. And that was tough. That said, a lot of my weeks were actually pretty reasonable because of our specialized group. They were more like 60, which is.
Did you ever do 3,000, 3,500?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no. So because of the specialized group, we didn't get the same hour requirements that others did. So I think, I was billing probably
what they're
2,500.
What rate they're billing you out for?
$500 an hour. I can tell you that's actually public record. Yeah. So I'm a brand new attorney, like just out of law school, charging $550. It was $550 an hour. That was 12 years ago, 13 years ago.
That's specialized.
Yeah, crazy, huh?
Okay, so sorry.
Yeah. So, the culture can be difficult at law firms. The hours can be hard. The work is hard. It's not a very social environment. You're in those environments, your head's down cranking. There's a lot of perks, but it's hard work. And, it's not glamorous. That's for sure. Not like you see in the movies or like it was for our summer. Well,
at some point you had an entrepreneurial idea because didn't you have an idea and then you left to pursue that idea?
Yes. So as I was working out there, we would do pro bono cases with low-income households, and pro bono just means it was free, and we would go out and work for these low-income households, helping them solve tax problems. Maybe it was a lien on a home or unpaid taxes. And by doing that, I kind of figured out, like I started doing a few of them, and I was like, man, why isn't there software that like automates this? Because this is a major problem like across all the United States. And so that's where the idea for Canopy actually came. And so I left to start a software company in that space. And
was it called Canopy?
It wasn't. So initially it was a service-based business. Well, initially I tried to build a Canopy, but I didn't have the skill set to do the software. So I turned it into a service business called Rocket Relief.
Okay.
And we were basically connecting taxpayers with professionals in a marketplace, and we would take a big chunk of the fee, almost kind of like a referral fee.
Okay.
And that got very automated, and it worked really well. And so it allowed me to kind of, take a back seat, and the company did really well. And so
how far from New York to where the company was functioning, getting
not
revenue?
that long. So we left Millbank in August of 2010, and the company was generating income by like March, April.
Enough to live on?
Yeah, enough to live on by that point.
Wow.
So, which was great. And then I did that until end of 2012.
Oh.
And then I joined another tech. My first real experience in tech was after that.
So what happened? First of all, Rocket
Relief.
Where's that today? What happened to it?
Yeah, so I sold it.
Okay.
And then
did you do okay on that?
I did okay.
Yeah.
Well, I did okay. Could have been better.
Yeah.
But the business and the cash flow on the business did really well.
Okay.
So for those 2 or 3 years that I was running it, it actually did really well. So it allows us to do a lot of things that we hadn't done previously because we've been college students, and so that was a fun time.
Was it a pay cut at your best years with Rocket Relief versus Millbank?
Oh,
or was it?
No, I think we did better with Rocket Relief than we did with Millbank.
That's impressive. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So especially with the cost of living adjustment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was better.
Okay. So did you decide to sell it because you wanted to join the other firm? Or?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I had an opportunity. A friend approached me about joining a startup that was looking to raise some seed money. The technology was really cool. I was flattered that they'd asked me. I didn't have any experience raising venture capital. I'd done some business plans and seen a little bit, but not really. And I thought, well, that's I'd be trading a service-based business, which is a really good lifestyle business, to do something new in tech. And I'm kind of lean into things I like to do, like have new experiences. And so I said yes. And so I joined that company as their CEO. There were only 2 employees. A CEO, but there were 2 employees, me and an engineer. And we worked on that for about 8 months before I got enough of an itch and a feel for how software worked to go out and do Canopy, which I was born kind of out of those combination of those 2 experiences.
What was the second company?
It's called Converis, and they're doing really well. They
exist still.
Oh yeah, they're doing really well. So when I started with them, they had a science team that was from the University of Utah. We worked with the tech transfer office at the U to transfer the technology out of the U and into a private venture-backed company. The technology is it's basically a camera that sits on a computer screen, and it looks at your eye movement, and the computer screen asks questions about things that you've done, like a lie detector. So it's just like the polygraph, except for you don't have to attach things to you, and it's more accurate. So in fact, funny enough, awesome. When I was here talking to the group today, one of your sales guys came up to me and said, when I was at the U, I went and did a test on that technology. They paid me $40 if I could beat it, and $20 if I couldn't beat it. And they had him steal some money, and then lie about it on the technology. So he was actually part of the original experiments. Was kind of fun. So that was a fun 8 months. I traveled all over. I went to Colombia, Mexico, Israel, Ukraine, with this technology, lie detection. So it was fun.
And how long were you with Converus?
8 months.
8 months, and then what made you leave?
So at month 8, the company was still early. We were still pre-revenue. There was still a lot of work to be done on the technology. I had a super good relationship with the science team, and I decided, but I was still an employee. I wasn't a founder. And I thought, could I combine this experience and go out and start something? I also at the time was looking at the time horizon. It was going to take a while before that technology was commercialized. And so I said, hey, look, let's see if we can transition it. They transitioned to a new CEO who's actually still the CEO. And they finally monetized it. It took them a little while. But then they've done phenomenal. They not only have broken into markets outside the country, but they're also in the country, which is really hard to do because it's mostly government contracts.
Wow.
So I left there in August. That was probably one of my most short-lived ventures, and immediately left, went out to learn how to code, and that's when I started coding. And yeah, that's when.
But did you go learn code because you already knew you wanted to do Canopy? I mean, when did the idea for Canopy?
Yeah. So Canopy was Rocket Relief, but it was the automation of that service business. So all I did with Canopy initially, well, it was a combination of two things. The big vision for Canopy was to build tax prep in the cloud for the first time for accountants. That didn't exist. It was like TurboTax exists for consumers, but it doesn't exist for accountants. So we wanted to do that.
Small to medium-sized accounting firms?
Yeah, small and medium. But eventually go upstream and move into the big four.
Yeah.
There are 3 or 4 big players in that space, and they do $3 billion of revenue on these legacy Windows-based software. And so we thought, if we can build this in the cloud, if we can then use APIs and connect bank accounts and K1s from partnerships and just all this data flows in, we can totally revolutionize the way that accountants prepare a return and also collaborate with their customers. The challenge with that...
Save time, save mistakes.
Time, yeah, everything.
Bill more.
Yep. So the challenge...
You can do more work, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the value proposition was huge, which was what caught investor attention. The challenge was it cost a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars to build that out. And we'd have to be building for years before we could monetize it, because you have to build it. It's like it's tax software. You can't get it wrong, right? You got to have a pretty robust. It's not only federal, but it's all 50 states and local.
It's a lot of info to get in there.
It's a lot,
and it has to be right.
It has to be right. So mission critical software, and so the strategy was, well, why don't we automate tax resolution, which was the service portion of Rocket Relief, and then that will give us a wedge.
Just for people who are listening, when you say automate tax relief, you're saying an automation so that taxes like that. The dispute
between the IRS and a taxpayer, you owe me taxes, you gave me a lien, whatever that might be, penalties and interest. We can automate the resolution of that for the accountant. So the accountant can work with their client, plug stuff into the software, and the software produces letters to the IRS, produces all the forms, which are pretty extensive forms. That didn't really exist prior to what we were working on at Canopy. So that was our wedge into the space. The idea was wedge our way in with tax resolution. then build in practice management, selling into the same customer base with accountants and practice management, so all the workflow, billing, CRM, and then eventually release tax prep several years later.
That's ambitious.
It's very ambitious. And then eventually release tax prep. And then you've got like a full suite where the accountant can literally, you're a one-stop shop. And for a competitor to catch up would be years. And the execution on it is really hard. So that's where I left Converis to go start Canopy. I didn't have the money to build it, outsource it. And
so you literally didn't know code, and you went to try to learn code to take on one of the most ambitious software projects.
Yeah. That's why I say sometimes being an entrepreneur, you got to be a little naive.
Oh, but earlier I just said one of the things I said was fascinating. Way back when we were talking about law, was that like a lot of entrepreneurs that I know either like know nothing, and then they just go start swinging for the fences and with not much of a skill set. And then I have other friends who are entrepreneurs who spend years becoming the expert at something. Like a simple one would be at tax accounting, and they do tax accounting for years, and then they start their own firm, right? Because a bunch of clients trust them. They're just know they've developed an expertise. I've got a friend who just did pharmaceutical businesses for years. Learned, he was mainly on the sales and marketing side. So then he earned enough of a reputation, knowledge, to where if a company was developing a drug that they necessarily didn't want to take it through the early stages, he would have the ability to know, I know what the market for that drug is. Like that's which I'm going to get. I have a question for that later. Well, I'm going to wait till we get to the funding rounds from some of the questions you had. Like what you said earlier is like a $4 billion market. How much of a piece of it were you targeting originally, Canopy? I want you to answer that yet. Yeah. But that had to have come up when you started talking to venture people as part of your deck. But usually the entrepreneurs I know who went and spent years developing an expertise maybe frown a little bit on the people who don't, and they don't really like to discuss, to tell young people, oh yeah, don't become an expert in anything, just go do whatever, right?
Do whatever, yeah.
And it's funny because they'll just kind of frown on that a little bit, but then we have plenty of entrepreneurs or friends of mine who didn't know anything and
go build something.
Yeah, you're a weird anomaly in the middle, because I think I put you in the first group because you developed an expertise, but I don't still see how all the things that you learned on really odd. No, I guess you are in the second group because you were building tax accounting software. You were a tax accountant. Yeah. You could never have done that. Yeah. Without the tax thing. And not only that, you had the expertise maybe from everything else that you did to know how to build a bridge between that and code. Yeah. I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That must have been one of the big hardships.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you mentioned that to me a few months back.
Yeah, when I coded it, I mean, I knew the tax forms. So I was able to code to the tax forms, and I was able to build it that way. Now, if I brought an engineer and tried to teach them tax, that's not really going to happen.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly.
So there you go. You go write code, and then let's start to that part of the story. You're writing code. You have this ambitious plan that you had to have known was going to cost a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Unless you were going to spend 250 years doing it yourself. Right. Then it'd be
exactly.
irrelevant.
Yeah.
Which the odd thing about technology startups, I'm guessing, is that like it's not just like, do you have the best technology, do you have the marketing, but there's like a time element involved too, right?
Totally. Yep.
So there we are. Let's pick it up in your basement.
Yeah. So started coding
and
it
Dr.
out.
Pepper, right?
A lot of Dr. Pepper. Yeah, that's right. You remember that, huh? Yeah. Yeah. No, I drank a lot of Dr. Pepper. So funny story on that. We were visiting some friends at a hotel. The hotel, for some reason, had a scale, like to weigh yourself on. Yeah. Most hotels don't do that, but this was a nice hotel, so they had a scale. And we were all getting on the scale, and everybody was like, "Oh yeah, that's how what I weigh," and get off. And the next one, "Oh yeah, that's about what I weigh." So I get on. I'm like 15, 20 pounds over what I thought I weighed, and I'm like, "What is wrong with the scale?" And this is still an ongoing joke. And they're like, there's nothing wrong with that scale. I'm like, there has got to be something wrong with the scale. Well, I had just been sitting in my basement and literally working like 60, 80 hours, probably more a week, just cranking on software. And I was fueling with cases of Dr. Pepper. I mean, I had like Dr. Pepper, I'd drink, and then I would just line them up the cans, and I thought it was funny. I had no idea the whole time I was like ballooning, gaining a ton of weight. And so I was like 15, 20 pounds more than I'd ever weighed. And that was a kind of a realization moment to me, like, oh, wait, it actually took me still a little while to lose that. But yeah, I fueled off Dr. Pepper and coded up kind of an initial product. And I don't know how far you want me to go, but I happened to meet an investor who shared the same thesis on the space. That was one of the lucky pieces, was he already had the same thesis, and he was kind of looking for somebody who would tackle it, and like, who's going to tackle it.
What was his expertise? What did he bring to the table, though? Was he on the accounting side, the coding side, the entrepreneurial management?
The investor?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he had been meeting with companies in the tax and accounting space and looking for a company that would take on Intuit in a cloud-based manner. So he had a thesis that all that desktop software would move to the cloud.
Is this an angel investor, or is this?
This is an institutional investor. Yeah.
Okay.
This was
I was
NEA.
going to say that's a bit ambitious.
Yeah.
To be looking at if you're an angel guy.
Yeah. This was NEA.
So where did Ashley play a role here? Is it in the beginning with at the Dr. Pepper time? Was it later? Was it both?
Yeah, she played a role in pointing out how much I weighed by drinking all the Dr.
As
Pepper.
well she should.
Yes. Yeah. But then in the early days when I was coding, because I was learning, I didn't know really what I was doing. She would help me code. I would have questions. I don't know how to do this, and she would come help me figure out how to.
What did you think about what you were doing? If I said to my wife, because what I did was I'm just doing this little pest. I didn't tell her it was going to be. I'm just doing this pest control branch.
Yeah.
That was a hard enough sell.
Yeah.
But to just say, all I'm going to do is just and explain what your ambitious plan was, my wife would say, I don't think. No, you're not. You're going to go get a job. What did Ashley say? Not only that, you were also doing the same thing to my wife, which was bringing her into it. I'm going to go do this. Oh, and I've got work for you for free.
Yeah, for free, exactly. Yeah, no, that worked pretty much the same way. She was really supportive from the beginning, yes. There wasn't a whole lot of pressure to go do something else or get a job. And that was pretty key. Because if there had been, then I would have, I might have had a different decision making, and it's like not like we had a ton of money at that point. We were in a good spot, but we weren't like
you could clearly see what you're doing was going to burn through all your cash.
Yeah, there was definitely you could see a path where the cash would run out.
Yeah.
Yep. So
that's extremely supportive.
Yeah, that was very supportive. Yeah. I think a lot of people.
Did she love you enough to get that scale from the hotel and put it in the basement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, the scale worked.
By the way, I lived with my grandparents while growing up.
Yeah.
And my grandparents had the Dr. Pepper truck that made deliveries to local grocery stores.
Yeah.
Delivered at our house. So like he would get out the dolly
loaded
loaded
Dr.
up.
Pepper.
Oh yeah, like two, three dollies full.
No way.
And come park it in the garage.
No way.
Yeah, we were a stop on the.
That is amazing.
And we weren't even writing code in the garage.
That is amazing.
Okay, Ashley actually did have to buy you a scale.
Yeah, she did. I thought it was broken. I really did. And I had people stand on it. I was like, man, and they're like, "Is that your weight?" They're like, "Yeah, it's pretty close." I mean, within a pound or two. I'm like, man.
A pound or two could be like the shoes you're wearing or what
yeah,
you had for
exactly.
lunch. So it's accurate.
Yeah, 20 pounds. I'm like, why is it so messed up for mine? But when you're growing like that,
yeah,
and you don't notice.
Know.
You don't notice, right?
Correct.
And so anyway, that was a good. I was still pretty young too. I was still early side of your 30s.
So did you know when you began at some point you're going to need funding?
Yes.
Okay, so this institutional investor, was he a friend? Where'd you run into this person?
His name's Chethan Puttagunta, really, really good guy. And quickly became a really good friend. We worked together for a long time.
Can you say what institutional investor he represented?
Yeah, NEA. Okay. So he was a partner at NEA. He ended up transitioning to Benchmark, another really prestigious venture fund, probably about a year before I left Canopy. He left from the board because he switched firms. And so we worked together for about 5 years.
How'd you meet him?
So a friend made an introduction, and I was out in the Bay Area fundraising. And
was he the guy that was in New York at the time?
Yeah, he was the guy that was in New York. So he was in New York at the time. I had a conversation with him on a Thursday. He said, "When are you leaving town?" And I said, "I'm leaving tomorrow." He says, "All right, I'm booking a trip back."
Meaning you were leaving San Francisco.
Leaving San Francisco.
You went to San Francisco.
Yes.
And
yeah,
you're meeting with his firm. He just happened to have been doing work in New York.
Yeah, well, I was meeting with other firms. I wasn't meeting with his. Yeah, so I was meeting with other firms in the Bay Area, and I was going to go back to Utah on Friday. So on Thursday, I'm talking with him. He's from the Bay Area. That's where his firm is.
Okay.
But he happened to be in New York on another deal. And he said, when are you leaving? I said, I'm leaving the Bay Area tomorrow to go back to Utah. He says, hang tight. I'm going to book airfare to come out there. So Friday morning, he shows up in San Francisco, gets an early plane ticket back. We go out to lunch at a restaurant that was kind of attached to his offices. And we had a conversation. First time I met him in person. And super sharp guy. And he understood the vision. He got it.
Well, he was already looking for it, right?
He was already looking for it. So he said, all right, term sheet's coming.
We talk a lot of people where they're going to get venture money. They have to sell the concept of their idea. It sounds like you might have had to sell them on you, but it didn't sound like you had to sell them on your idea.
Yeah, he was all in on the idea.
So that was a good match.
Oh yeah, very good match. Yep. So once he was in, then everybody else I had talked to was also very interested, right? In fact, I actually had a term sheet at that point from another fund, and that fund ended up investing as well. So with NEA, but once NEA comes in, everybody wants to invest. So that's what got the ball moving. And then again, I point to right time, right place.
How did you already at this point? You already had 20,000 in revenue.
Yeah.
Who from who?
Accountants.
Just local.
All over the country. Yeah. So I had just as a one-man band, coded this thing up.
And you did it. You wrote all the code.
I wrote all the code.
Something that you actually got revenue on from.
Yeah, I wrote all the code.
Wow.
Got it. I built the whole thing, got it live, and then I started looking up accountants on LinkedIn. Just doing things like you just get scrappy and contacting them, demoing the software, and selling it. And we actually grew to 20,000 in like, it wasn't very long. It was like 4 to 6 weeks. It went pretty quick. So the software sales picked up.
So when the original round was it $2 million?
Mm-hmm. $2 million.
Was that to get to $2 million? Did you have to meet with anyone else, or was just that lunch meeting?
That was just the lunch meeting.
I guess then you got the term sheet, but by the time the money hit your account, did you have to have another meeting?
Nope.
Okay. Do you think guys like that at that level at NEA that's really sophisticated and like I say he probably didn't need approval for $2 million?
Didn't need it.
Do you think he would go around if those guys when they're making a bet on your space, where he would go find people, maybe go this seems good, and maybe like in a poker table, go lay down like 8 bets.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. So was he laying down bets on other people?
He was laying down bets on other people. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a strategy. They'll get in early on a company. So there's a lot of, So
I don't mean other companies. Of course he was. I meant in your space.
Oh no. Yeah, no other. Not that I'm aware of any of our investors were in any other.
I mean that's all he does for a living is go lay down bets on.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's his job. I meant in your space. What he was looking for was he going and trying to pick.
Okay. Yeah, no, there was no. So none of our investors had, as far as I know, ever had another investment in our space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get the original $2 million, and you're like, wow.
Yeah. Wow. So so right before we lined up the $2 million, I had several referrals for my the first, basically a co-founder.
Yeah.
Was an engineer who happened to be Ashley's uncle. So that. Ashley's uncle was a scale engineer, or architect basically at Symantec, and so his name's Rod Gilbert, and so I had convinced him somehow that if we raised this money, he'd leave Symantec and come join up, right? And
that's dangerous.
He is, yeah, it's scary. So he came on board, and we got super lucky to have him because there are very few It's a rare talent to find an engineer who can scale a massive code base like Canopy ended up becoming. It was much bigger than most tech startups, but he brought that skill set to the table. And frankly, I didn't know him that well beforehand. We'd met, a few times, and but I had friends even from my mission who had worked with him, and I'd go ask them who should I, and they'd be like Rod Gilbert. So I had multiple people pointing to him, and so I was able to convince him to come over.
And you already knew him?
I knew him, but from like family events, I didn't know him well.
Right.
So then we had the conversation like, look, we're family, we're going to be in this together, but we have to understand that things can go sideways, and that conversation, which is good to have as co-founders, right? And like we can't let this like ruin our relationship. Well, it turns out we had like a great relationship. We started on the same day and we left on the same day.
Wow. So he was a co-founder in Canopy.
Basically, yep.
Wow. Well, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So really, really, really fun. And then we
did it work out well for him? I mean, was it worth his time?
Oh,
not only just for the experience, but financially.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, he's said several times to me, do it over again.
That's good.
It was fun. It was a fun time.
That's special. That says a lot about.
In fact, I talked to him today. We talk on a pretty regular basis.
That says a lot about you and him.
Yeah.
That you could do that. That's
yeah. So super fun. Yeah. So that's the seed round.
So where did that get you product wise? The $2 million.
Well, so I was such a good engineer that they had to redo the entire code base when we brought on real engineers. But that's okay because
that's not a surprise.
It's not a surprise. And the
MVP, I don't mean it disrespectfully. It just is what it is.
It is what it is, right? And the MVP served its purpose, which was to get enough revenue to raise some money. We also designed the software. So once we brought on Rod and other engineers, we were starting to think bigger, right? Like at this point, we're starting to lay the foundation for a much more complex software, which was tax prep. So we had to redo everything. So we actually shut down the business, the website and everything, the sales. We shut it all down because we knew we were going to transition. It was not going to be easy. I shouldn't say the business, just the marketing and sales. And we repurposed the software, relaunched it maybe 9 months later. And that's what we did. We worked on that, and we started getting initial traction, not in the form of sales, but just people were signing up on the website organically. It was like word of mouth, which is very uncommon in B2B SaaS. And
wow.
So we raised the Series A almost exactly 1 year later. We were still, at that point, we were now pre-revenue because the $20,000 we'd pretty much lost because we hadn't worked on that. We were redoing the whole thing.
Yeah.
But there was so much interest. We had over 1,000 accountants who'd signed up on the interest list that NEA saw that and they're like, there's pent up demand here. Let's put more money in. So that round was, it's funny. I have to look on Crunchbase to remind myself how much each round was, but it was something like $8 million for the next round.
Okay.
Something like that.
Well, can I back up? So like I heard you say earlier that you walked in and you said,
yeah,
20 grand in revenue. They said, what do you think it's worth? And you're like, 8 million.
Yeah.
So they said they threw in the 2 million and said the company's worth 10. So I'm assuming they were taking roughly a 20% stake.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how they come with the valuation. Okay.
Yep.
And so like that's stock stuff, and I don't care how much of it you ever want to talk about, but I know that gets to be a fairly complex subject because there's different types of stock.
Yeah.
You know how it's convertible and what just all that gets pretty complex. How whose is dilutable and whose isn't. But let's skip forward and so you get the 8 million. Is it also from NEA or did you bring on?
So NEA led that round as well.
Okay.
With existing investors. So that was mostly the same group between the seed and the A.
Okay.
It wasn't until the B that we started bringing on additional investors.
And did NEA want to do that?
Yeah. No, NEA. So for NEA, they were still betting on tax prep and it moving forward. So they were happy to put some additional capital in. Yeah.
Why would a company like NEA do they just to diversify and spread out the risk? Is that why they want to go bring on other investors? Who participated next? Was it Wells Fargo?
Still NEA.
Okay.
In fact, in the next two rounds, NEA participated in every round. In fact, all our investors have participated in all the rounds. But typically, as the rounds get bigger, they bring on additional investors to spread out some of the risk, and they will do their pro rata. So whatever their pro rata is to keep their ownership percentage is what they will typically invest.
Okay. And
so that was in the next two rounds we brought on Tenaya Capital, which is another Bay Area fund. We brought on NICA, which is a New York fund. Wells Fargo has a venture arm, and they invested in the B1. So several other groups came in the B and the B1.
Those negotiations seem to me, with no experience in this, like they'd be more challenging.
They're much more challenging.
Way more challenging to determine, because now, like, what's the value and how do you do this to keep the pro rata? I mean, like that just seems hard.
Yeah, I think
like you said, there must be some skilled people in the room.
Oh yeah, exactly. So this is where definitely my law school and law firm days paid some major dividends, because most entrepreneurs will walk into that room and like even the contracts and how they work together. There's a lot of documents that come together, and I'm not an expert in it, but I understand them pretty well, especially conceptually, right? So it paid big dividends to be able to negotiate that. I knew what I wanted. I knew what was important to me within the deal docs, and they knew what they wanted and what was important to them. And I think that they got a good deal, but I also think we got a good deal, and we definitely got a better deal than most entrepreneurs got at that stage.
So that helped Rob too, right? Rod?
Yeah, Rod. It helped
well.
everybody. Yeah, it helped everybody. So I think it was a win-win. And, obviously they invested, which, that they were, happy to do. And so, yeah, but the transactions are different. It's also a different mindset, right? Like the early days in the seed and the A, and I was talking about this, is like, it's all about vision and team and like, how big could this be? And that's why it's really fun to raise, because you have to show some numbers and traction, but you don't have really a real business on your hands yet. You have like the beginning. You might be at a few $1 million of revenue at that point. It's when you're getting the B1s. Now you're at 10 plus, right? And so that now you got a company that's actually like, it's actually a business. And the people who invest in the Bs and the B1s, they're growth investors. They think about the business entirely different than the early stage guys. They're by the numbers, right? So like, what's your revenue? What's your gross margin? What is your, how all your S&M ratios, sales and marketing, your churn levels, gross churn, net churn. I mean, that analysis is being done by a team of analysts at these funds to make their investment.
Yeah, we're past idea stage.
Yeah, we're past idea stage. And your forecast, is it defensible? Like, does your forecast tie to what you're actually accomplishing today? So the B1 was a great learning experience for me, because that was a very different way to think than the early stage. And it made us more operationally sound, because we had to get tighter about the numbers.
So I have a question. I mean, I've never been through this. Is like, did you say it was the B1 rounds where they started wanting a lot more of the numbers and a lot of
the B and the B1
key predictive indicators, for lack of better terms?
Yeah.
The which two?
It's the Series B and B1, which are basically two different financing rounds.
So the Series B and the B1, was that still coming from NEA, or does a company like NEA, meaning do they have like within NEA different teams of people? And then my next question is, it's sort of the same question, or is that why some of the other investors are brought in, because they more specialize on that type of follow-up with all those metrics?
Yeah. So in typical venture, typically you do get the early guys who are not as growth oriented, and so you do bring in the later guys who think differently. But with NEA, they're different. They run it all the way through. Okay. So they were as sensitive to it in the B and the B1 as the other investors who were coming in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because what I hear from you is like, you're getting a lot more people that you have to answer to.
Oh yeah,
it sounds like.
There's
can you guys stop calling me?
Yeah, there's a lot of calls and updates and keeping the board on the same page, and you get good at it. And
does it get political in there? I mean, do you ever get like? I mean, it seems like at some point different investors may think, "Gosh, the strategy's wrong," or just anything's wrong, where they start getting an opinion and then start trying to get allies to like influence stuff.
I think of the 5 years we had maybe 7 or 8 months of that, so very little.
Yeah, that's not that bad at all.
So most of the time people were aligned, and I think that speaks to the people we brought on board. I mean, the investors, they're still good friends, and
that's great.
And so, well, at least most of them, I should say.
That's great.
And so they, the investor group was a good investor group, and I also tried to give an update and be as transparent as possible. I think that's one thing I learned as a CEO, is like, I had to send out, I wanted to make sure that I was proactive, right? You can't be reactive to a board. You can't like come in and like no surprises. That's bad, right? So you got to keep everybody apprised on the strategy, on the numbers, and like that takes work and planning. But I think it paid off dividends for a long, long time. And I got a lot of good feedback on that. I think some CEOs in those situations will kind of go a month or two or without an update, and that gets difficult, because then you're surprising people.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I did it perfectly, but I think it went well enough. Obviously, we raised a lot of money that there was confidence in what the business was doing.
What was so what are the last rounds? Were B and B1 your last rounds? Or
yeah.
And so it got up to 80 million?
We ended up raising north of 80 million. Yeah. Wow. I think it was 85 total. Yeah.
It sounds like a little pressure on Kurt Averill.
There is a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure. So that's where the job changes significantly, right? So instead of the creative building, iterating, being close to the customer, which I really enjoyed and like the customer focus, it's a lot of board dynamic. There's a lot of time on the board. My job went from, customer, product for the first few years to culture of the company, obviously responsibility for the numbers, but then a lot of fundraising. We needed a lot of capital, so there's a lot of going out to the Bay Area. I spent a lot of time out there.
So I'm curious to know which of those three was your favorite, and I'm guessing it wasn't number 3.
Oh, yeah. So I love, and now that I'm working on my next startup, I love the early stages because I love being close to the customer and just getting that experience, nailing that experience. And we spoke a little bit kind of before we got on camera on if you grow too fast, things get out of whack.
Yeah.
Or they can get out of whack, and it's very common for them to get out of whack. And so making sure you got the right people and processes and procedures in place so that experience can stay consistent.
Yeah.
Is like something that I learned from Canopy because we grew really fast. I mean, we were growing 200% and then for the first few years, and then 100% in growth year over year, and we just grew fast. And when you're adding that kind of head count and you things just get loose.
When you say you're growing that much, do you mean you're
revenue.
growing in your revenue is growing that much?
That fast?
Because I'm sure at different times your employee count was probably
the employee count was at times growing, 50 to 100%.
Because I'm curious what you thought, because I know I've talked to you in the past and you've mentioned how much you like helping people and that it's fun to create opportunities people can grow. To me, at least from my experience, a lot of that comes from the part number 2 that you just mentioned, which is the culture.
Yeah.
And the culture and the brand and opportunity for people.
Yep.
So is that something you still enjoy quite a bit?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I love the people side of it. So yeah, it's probably my favorite part, right? I mean, most I view the business as we are a people business that happens to do XYZ. We happen to do accounting. And I think the culture at Canopy was pretty spectacular, honestly. There was a real tight community. I mean, even when we were at 250 plus people, the feeling of like mission and accomplishment was like real and tangible because we broke through some technology barriers that hadn't been done in 30 years and actually launched TAC Prep. So that was those kinds of things and the revenue growth. I mean, that was stuff that was like a result of a team that was like pushing really hard. So I love that part. Yeah, I love it.
Back in the early days, like angel seed days, and you looked at that $4 billion industry that's probably growing.
Yeah. So it's $20 billion with multiple companies with $3 to $4 billion in revenue.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, $20 billion.
Yeah, $20 billion.
But the 3 main players, $3 to $4 billion.
Yeah.
What were your low, medium, high aspirations? And I'm specifically only asking this question of what you were thinking
for the business
in the seed time period. Like, what were you thinking? You and the investors thinking, you know what? Low, we would hope we could maybe be to this point, and medium this point, and high this point.
Yeah, so it never really changed.
I'm not. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
It never really changed. Like the goal for us, and from the beginning was to IPO. So to IPO, you typically have to be at $100 million recurring revenue, and at $100 million recurring revenue, you're $1 billion business in tech. So so that was the goal. Yeah. And the way that our investor group thought, which I subscribe to, is you run the business that you can run it in perpetuity. So when it does go public, it can continue to operate, and you're not running it to be acquired. So that's the way we thought about it, and it really never changed the entire time we were there, or I was there. Now, that said, if something knocks you off that trajectory of the IPO, then you have to look at other options. And acquisition would have been, would be and still is for the business like a good option. But as long as you're on the trajectory toward an IPO, which we were for many years, then you just keep pushing.
I was just curious if Canopy ever felt like, I'm not talking about looking at the IPO as an end. I'm talking about this company in 20 years or, if they ever thought that it could be one of the players that was doing a few billion in revenue.
Oh yeah.
If that was
that was definitely one of the outcomes. Yeah. So
right.
your outcomes were, best case was like $1 billion plus revenue. Middle outcome case, which is still a really good outcome, is 100 to 300 million.
Yeah.
And then anything below that, the NEAs of the world are not that interested in like, $100 million exits, right? It doesn't move the needle for them. So they're looking for $1 billion exits, which typically is going to be north of 100 million in revenue.
Okay. So having gone through that experience, how long was that canopy experience for you from beginning to end? 5 years. And you and Rod started the same day. You finished the same day.
The same day and finished the same day.
And you're still friends and family.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
You're welcome at Ashley's home.
Yeah.
And so now, what's next?
So working on the next startup.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I took a sabbatical, got some time to decompress and recharge. And as you know, companies are hard and they can take a toll. And so I got to.
How old are you?
I'm 40.
Okay. I'm 49. And you asked me that question earlier.
Yeah.
Right? You said, maybe you can do this 2 or 3 times. I was going to say, I agree that 2 or 3 times, but I would condition that there's a time element involved.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'd do it again.
Yeah.
At 49. I would have done it again at 44.
Yeah.
But at 49, I don't know.
Yeah. That's good to know. So now I know what my time is. Yeah. Let's close it in.
Wow.
So, I agree. So it's, we're on to the next thing that has nothing to do with accounting and or tax.
We look forward
in the real estate space, and
we look forward to finding out what it is. Did you say it's in the real estate space?
It's in the real estate space.
Cool.
Yeah. So we're really excited about it. Big opportunity. Another swing for the fences. Much easier on the execution than building tax prep, which was a major heavy lift. So different challenges, but we're excited. So we'll have more.
Yeah, I look forward to just watching it unfold.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be kind of fun. It seems that with your with the experience that you've already had, that like it's going to be pretty valuable.
Yeah.
In the next round,
so valuable.
So my first company was called Mayday.
Yeah.
Before I started Moxie, and it was my intention was to do Mayday and then go get an MBA. And after I did Mayday, I'm like, what? I just learned everything. That was only learning.
Yeah. Was Mayday in pest control? Or
it was just a pest control company. I was my plan was do it for 3 years to get my money to get an MBA.
Yeah.
And after I did it for 3 years, I'm like, wait, I just learned how to do this the right way. No, I need to go do it the right way.
Interesting.
So I'm curious if you have any thoughts like that. I don't know how you couldn't go through what you went through and have like a whole laundry list.
Yeah. No, my lens on how to operate the business and even how to pick the right concept and business model is totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the learnings, you spend enough time in it, you learn a lot. So in fact, even through the iteration process, right? Like I iterated through a bunch of different industries before landing on this one. And it's easy to poke holes in, okay, here are the issues you're going to run into and why it would work or wouldn't work. And without the experience, it's, you're kind of just throwing a dart at a dartboard on an idea, because it's hard to know like what works in SaaS if you haven't done it.
What does Ashley think about the new idea?
I think she's pretty excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's real estate in homes is a space I think we're both pretty passionate about. So,
and I don't know if we went into this, but 4 kids, right?
4 kids.
You have 4 children, ages 14 to 6.
Yeah.
Was it challenging doing Canopy? I mean, I know you said you had one in a stroller back in the New York days.
Yeah.
But going through everything you just went through with Canopy with 4 kids and young.
Yeah. I and this would be a good question for Ashley, but I've talked to her about it before. I do a pretty good job of being able to turn on and off, right? So,
really?
Yeah, I can come home and be home, and I mean, I'm back on in the evenings, like as soon as the kids are in bed, and it's hard. It's a lot of time commitment, but I think I do a decent job. I don't let it consume everything that I do.
Yeah.
So I can manage it, and then when we play hard as a family, we try to hit it hard. We try to do some fun stuff.
Let's hear about that.
So we have a few things we like to do. Over the last 5 years, our biggest probably was Lake Powell.
Okay.
So we take the whole family to Lake Powell on a houseboat with extended family or friends, and we spend a week. In fact, or more. We've spent 2 or 3 weeks in a couple of summers down there. So that's been a ton of fun, and it's every age. Grandma can have fun, grandma and grandpa, all the way down to the 5 or 6 year old. And we take it pretty seriously because we've done it a lot. We spent a lot of time on the lake. So we take it very seriously in terms of safety, and we just have a really, really good time.
Before we get to flying,
flying.
Before we get there, what are other things that you like to do to play hard? Powell is as good as you can get.
Yeah, Powell is amazing. So we love Powell. I love to mountain bike, and Ashley and the kids have started to pick it up as well. So we started mountain biking together. Even the 6-year-old comes out. We ski as a family.
Do you do that just around here? I mean,
so we mountain bike here in Corner Canyon, as well as Moab, St. George. In fact, we were just down in St. George a week ago mountain biking. Ashley and I have gone out to New Zealand and mountain biked. So it's a ton of fun, and the kids are getting better at it. So they seem to be enjoying it. I don't know. Maybe they just come because we tell them. So that's been a lot of fun. And then we ski, all from the 6-year-old up. We all ski. So.
Who's the best?
Well, you got some natural talent in some of the kids, but yeah, the kids are. It'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, to see
some of. Huh?
Yeah. I said okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So some of them love it more than others, and it comes more naturally. So it'll be fun to watch.
All right.
I don't think we'll ever do it like competitively. My extended family did, but recreationally we sure like to do it.
All right, flying.
I'm a pilot. I got a pilot's license a few years ago, and I flew.
While you were at Canopy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I flew.
The board was okay with that, huh?
Yeah. They didn't even take a life insurance. Maybe I was just expendable. I don't know. They didn't no key man insurance. So I learned how to fly. My grandparents flew.
Is the same grandpa that started the homes?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, he was in World War II. He was not a pilot in World War II, but he flew. He was the gunner on like a B-52 or something. So they came back and they flew quite a bit. They flew all over California and Mexico and stuff. So I always heard those stories and I was like, that sounds so cool. So I learned how to fly, and I had a Cirrus for a while, which is like a
the kind of the parachute.
Yeah, the kind of the parachute.
The safe one.
Yeah, the safe one. And so it was so fun. I had a ton of fun.
The one, but they have the cool.
Yeah, right on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
So flew all over the place. Used to fly out to meetings in the Bay Area. Just take off out of Provo and head out there. Flew the kids out. We did some. Our oldest is very into. Our two oldest are very into American Girl dolls, which is out in Wisconsin. So we flew from Salt Lake or Provo to Wisconsin and we went to a benefit sale, which is like a charity event, and then we went to Mall of America, and it's just you just jump from one place to the next and you come home, so that's been fun. Yeah, and I have some friends who fly. They fly some. This is a process. I started in a 2-seater, then I went to a 4-seater. And then eventually you get into like bigger planes. So I have some friends who fly some larger turboprops and stuff. And
King Airs or Pilatus or
some Pilatus and TBMs and a Piper M600s or Meridians. Mm-hmm. So Ashley and I flew together last summer. We went up and test drove the new M600, which has Autoland, and it's like.
I'm not even familiar. Who makes the M600?
It's Piper.
Okay.
So it's a turboprop. So it's 6 people. And I got to fly. It was really cool. So the Autoland is basically like Tesla Auto Park. You literally hands off the plane. You push a button. A Siri voice comes over, says, I'm going to land the plane for you. And it takes it all the way down to the runway, puts the plane on the runway, comes to a complete stop, and is like, you are now safely at your destination. No, we didn't touch the pedals or the controls at all.
That's like everything hard about flying.
Yeah, everything hard about flying. Took care of it all.
So how
even made radio calls. So we didn't have to do anything.
It gets ATIS for you?
Yeah, everything.
Yeah.
ATIS.
So
sounds like you've flown.
Not much.
Okay.
What's the how hard of a crosswind can it land in?
I don't know on the autopilot,
Yeah,
but
I'm
I'm
curious.
guessing it could probably handle quite a bit. I mean,
10, 15?
I bet it could handle 10, 15. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised when we landed
it would crab too, into the wind, landing, and then straight out.
I think it would crab right into the wind and land that thing on the.
Wow, that's incredible.
And even when we landed, I don't remember what the wind conditions were like. We landed in Tooele. We took off out of Salt Lake, and then landed in Tooele. But you just picked the airport. It brought it down. Now it's not designed to do that on a regular basis like a Tesla Auto Park. It's designed for an emergency, like if the pilot loses consciousness or something, then the passenger can push the button and it will bring it down. But yeah, it pays attention to where traffic is at and it takes that plane right down.
When you say take it down, like would it actually put it in the pattern or take it to the airport? I mean, like the person doesn't even have to line it up for final.
No. we were I'm trying to remember what altitude we were at. We were probably 15, 20,000 feet. We pushed the button. We're outside of Tooele, pretty far outside. It picks up the glide slope, makes radio announcements. I have video of it. It's unbelievable.
Because they've got to be responding to how the person's telling them to go, right? Because you start making those calls, they're telling you, go to this place.
Yeah.
And this is how I want you to enter the pattern. And it does it?
So I don't think it necessarily. It won't take like a air traffic controller telling it what to do.
Okay.
So it won't respond to that because it's emergency only. It will tell it we have an emergency, and then it expects people to move out of the way.
When you hit the thing, does it automatically mean there's an emergency? Like, does it send out a squawk, or does it, or not necessarily?
I don't remember exactly, but I suspect that it does. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's squawking.
So it's like truly is an emergency only.
I think it's it's truly an emergency only. You wouldn't push it. Yeah. So it's probably squawking the emergency, and then the traffic calls are being made that this is an auto land emergency.
Yeah.
We're coming in, but for peace of mind in terms of like. And honestly, at some point, that's just going to be how people land. I mean, jetliners do it already. So
it starts putting the flaps down and doing it all.
And by the way, when it landed and it hit, that was my biggest question: is how hard is it going to hit the runway? It was like butter. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was so crazy. And then and then you land, it stops and says, "You may now exit the airplane." And we're like, "What in the world? This is crazy." So
that's pretty awesome. So you went and tested?
Yeah, Piper was in town, and they knew I'm always checking out their planes, but so they called up and said, "Hey, we got this Autoland feature, which is brand new. You want to come up and try it out?" And I said, "Oh, absolutely." So,
and it's the Meridian specifically.
It's the M600
Meridian.
Yeah,
but the Meridian's the one that is. I forgot what they have a Meridian and something else, but one of them
the Malibu
is
Piston. Are you thinking of the Piston?
I'm thinking. I just know that one's piston, one's turboprop, and one of them is I forget the word, pressurized.
Oh yeah. So the Malibu's piston, the Meridian is the predecessor to the M500 and the M600.
Okay.
So the Meridian is a turboprop. The M500 and M600 are also turboprop, but they're like the newer version of the Meridian.
Okay.
And pressurized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they can fly up 20 to low 20s.
Yeah, I think they're at. I think they hit 30 as their ceiling. Yeah, you're up there.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, if you're so you fly turboprops at this point. That means you've been doing.
So I'm not rated for turboprop, just for the piston, but that's kind of the next stepping stone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So and it's a passion you enjoy doing it.
Yeah,
Does Ashley fly as well?
She's flown with me.
Okay.
Yeah, but
any interest in becoming a pilot from her?
No, I don't think so. Okay. Yeah. No. But the kids are because they all think it's amazing, right? And I think you can. So. I mean. It's an expensive hobby. Yeah. As it sounds like you probably know, but the
I know of. I'm not a pilot. I'm okay. I'm not.
But the freedom to come and go is just like unparalleled. It's unparalleled.
Yeah. It sounds like you probably fly down to Powell.
Oh yeah.
When you do that. Yeah.
Well, that's the pitch, right? So when we're talking about, and we're not serious about getting a turboprop anytime soon, but when we do talk about it, it's like, well, it's so expensive. Well, yeah, but you're down in Powell in 40 minutes versus a 6-hour, drive. And it literally is just a hop. Mm-hmm. I mean, I went with a friend once. It was a Piper. I think it was M500, M600. We flew from Provo to St. George to Salt Lake, back to Provo. And we left at like 7. And we did that whole loop, landing at each spot and going into the FBO, and we were back by like 10 a.m.
Well, in San Diego, like it's a hop to Lake Arrowhead.
Yeah.
So like it changes it. Anyway, so like kind of to wrap up, what would you say is like one or two big learning experiences that you've had from that you will take into your next venture that's kind of specific, or if you want to look at it a different way, what's one or two pieces of advice you'd give to wannabe entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So I think the thing that I'm taking in is I'm going to be a lot more deliberate about all the systems and processes and like and especially in the scale side, right? So I've experienced the scale where it went very smoothly, and then I also experienced the mega scale where things got a little wobbly. And so that's probably the biggest takeaway for me, because it's also one of the harder parts of starting the business is that scale aspect, is making sure that everything is locked down. And, as we were talking about earlier, scripts, the conversations, how everything works, because as you introduce more people into the system, things go all kinds of different directions. So that's it. And then the biggest advice I'd have for somebody who's not quite at the scale stage is just stay real close to the customer. Just solve a pain point really, really well, and make that experience amazing. Like where they don't want to get rid of you because getting rid of whatever it is that you're doing is
expensive.
It's too expensive. It's too painful. And so whatever it is you're doing is adding a lot of value to what they need. That's like
some of the best advice. I think that's just golden advice for anybody that's going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. It's easy to get focused on the product. Well, your product's only so good. It's if the customer, you can have an amazing product, but if it's not solving a problem for the customer,
something they can't do without, there's no substitute for it,
then it's not gonna.
Yeah,
it's gonna be tough. So that's probably the biggest advice I'd have.
Well, great. Thank you for taking time to stay
Yeah,
up. And I
thank
know
you.
it lasted a long time.
No,
but I've really enjoyed meeting with you, get to know you. So I want to especially thank again Kurt Avarell. His wife Ashley is also here. So really appreciate your time and your advice and sharing your journey with us. It'll be fun to watch you, to see what your family does, who becomes a top skier, and also to see how the next venture goes.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.